Hey guys, welcome back to Keys to the Cosmos. Well, it's that time again. It's time for another gear review video. Hopefully you're able to check out my last video, my astrophotography target tips number 18 on IC410, the Tadpoles Nebula. Because in that video I mentioned, sort of introduced this scope. I talked very briefly about it. That's why I wanted to do another video with a lot more in-depth information, everything you need to know. So maybe help you decide if this is the kind of scope that would work for you. But in talking about this scope, we're going to talk about, of course, its specifications. We'll talk about the material it's made of and why that's important. And just sort of the type, we're going to focus mainly on astrophotography as we always do, but we'll even talk a little bit about visual. I've had some time to spend doing a little bit of visual with this. Actually had this scope for months now. We all know the story about my mount and how it was back ordered for several months. But now that it's here and I've been able to do a lot of testing with this and produce a few images, or at least 3 now. I definitely have some experience in using the scope and a lot of information to share with you. So I hope you enjoy it. But before we begin, if you haven't subscribed, please do, guys. I have a lot more coming, a lot more equipment reviews like this, and of course my astrophotography target tips series as well. So let's talk about the Explore Scientific ED102. So just some of the specifications, and please forgive me, I have my notes here. I can't remember everything, but to give you a quick overview, it's a 4-inch apochromatic refractor. So 4 inches of aperture, which is the ED102, 102 millimeters equals about 4 inches. It has a focal length of 714 millimeters as is, without any reducer, which we'll talk about shortly. And the ED in that 102, and the name of this refers to extra low dispersion glass. So most telescopes use ED glass. It's a high quality glass. But this one in particular uses a FCD 100 Hoya glass. So that combined with the apochromatic lenses, 3 of them, which means that it corrects for 3 different wavelengths of color, red, green, and blue. So basically the telescope brings them all to a point and focuses it. And by doing all 3 colors instead of just 2 on an achromatic, as we've talked about in my video, my initial review of the Red Cat and my Sharp Star, I talk more about the difference between the 2. But with those 3 wavelengths being focused at one time, it corrects for, aberrations, for color fringing around stars. In other words, you're going to get very crisp, very accurate colors with this telescope. And that's what you want. I love refractors. I'm just a refractor guy. I do own a Celestron Edge HD. I've made a sort of a preview video of, some of the specifications on that. I haven't had a lot of time to use it, but I definitely will be this winter. But I love refractors because they give, really nice contrast. And that's what I like in my images and also for visual as well. Before we talk all about the astrophotography side of this, which is what we focus on mainly with this channel, I just want to say that I did use this for visual. And I was pretty blown away. Now I was comparing it to a Celestron 6 SE, which is an SCT Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope. Definitely not comparable. We know that as far as glass and all that, but and of course focal length is quite a difference. That one has like 1500 millimeters. This one has, as we mentioned, 714. So a little bit less than half. But what I can tell you is with this glass here, this Hoya glass, you get beautiful views. Very contrasting. If you put a nice visual observing filter in here, wow, this scope is amazing. It really was, it was so much better than the SCT. When you're looking at planets, you see much more contrast between the background and the planet. You see the details. And then if you put a really nice Barlow into this, okay, you don't want to use a cheap one. You have nice glass. So anytime you put a low quality glass, it makes the whole system to the lowest point of glass that it has. So make sure if you're going to use this for visual, buy a really nice Barlow. And you get a 2.5 time Barlow, 4 time Barlow, maybe even a 5 times Barlow if it's a really good one. This will give you some serious focal length, some serious magnification, and some beautiful views. So if you're someone who likes to do visual as well, let me just get that right out of the way. Amazing. And I was really blown away with it. So that goes to show that the glass in here is very good. So let's talk about some of the specifics when it comes to astrophotography. Well, first of all, let's talk about the weight. So it's 7 pounds. Now, I couldn't believe the first time I picked this up, wow, I couldn't believe how light it was. It is a very compact telescope. Now when you pull the dew shield out here, it definitely gets bigger, and you add on a reducer and a camera and all that. It does start to get quite long, and it is something you need to be aware of on your mount, okay? I will say that, even though it's very light, it does get long, so you're gonna wanna maybe extend your legs on your tripod and just make sure that there's clearance. When you're shooting near zenith, this does get long quickly, and you don't wanna hit the ground or the legs on your tripod. So just something to keep in mind, but very light, 7 pounds. I mean, you can use anything outside of a star tracker. I would not put this on, but anything outside of that, you should be fine. Most mounts now start around, I think, 25 pounds. So even this thing fully loaded up, if you put a guide scope on it, you're nowhere near that. And that's nice. That means that if you already have a mount, you're probably not gonna have to buy a new one for this. And if you need to buy a mount to go with this, you know, you don't have to go with something crazy. You can buy one of the lower end ones, you know, with less weight capacity, and it shouldn't cost you too much money. Now, as you can see, it's made of carbon fiber. What are the benefits of that? Well, there's another version made of aluminum that's just white, and it's significantly cheaper. I can't remember exactly how much, but it's definitely cheaper. And it was enticing. I thought about it, but let's be honest, we all love the look of the carbon fiber. It's just a gorgeous scope, but there are some functionality to it as well. So first of all, it is light. We know that about the carbon fiber. They use it in a lot of like supercars and things like that. It's also very hard and rigid, so it doesn't crack easy. And it also doesn't flex easy, say in temperature swings. So when you're imaging, say in the winter here in Toronto, where it can swing anywhere from, you know, 5 to 10 degrees quite easily throughout the night. So what happens when on a normal telescope, that aluminum is moving, expanding and contracting, and that means the glass inside is also doing the same. And when the glass lenses move, your focus changes. So it can easily go out of focus, which is why they always say to leave your telescope outside before you start imaging. That way you sort of allow the telescope come down to ambient temperature, which is still the case to do with this. I always let it sit outside, but with the carbon fiber, in theory anyway, you don't get that shift, and you don't need to make adjustments as often to your focus, even if you're imaging, you know, 6-7 hours going for a long night. So that's definitely a nice thing, but it's very strong, and it's, you know, as you mentioned, very beautiful. So I'm really happy with the way it looks and performs. So that's nice to have both of those. So 714 millimeters of focal length, which is a decent amount in that 4-inch aperture. It's definitely, you know, this isn't a galaxy hunter. It's not supposed to be, but we'll talk more about that, exactly what you can use this with. But it's still a good focal, a good focal length for a variety of things. And when you put the reducer on, which we'll talk as well about shortly, it gives you a lot of flexibility. You can go after the small things, but you can also go after those bigger summer emission nebula. And this scope will do both. So that's nice to have. So we'll talk about why that helps make this what I would consider, you know, pretty much the perfect candidate for a one scope collection. But we'll talk more about that as well. So what else can we talk about when it comes to this scope? Well, we have the focuser. It's a 2.5-inch hex focuser. It holds 10 pounds of equipment, so that's more than enough for the reducer, a camera, filter wheel, filter drawer, anything you want to put on the back. Should handle it no problem, and you're not going to get any tilt. When it comes to what it comes with out of the box, it comes with everything you see here, not this finder base. It has its own. Just quickly, I'll get that out of the way. Explore Scientific has their own, and I don't love them because they don't have a Vixen base, which means you need to use a different base for, say, your guide scope if it comes with a base already, which is kind of a pain because Vixen is sort of the standard for that. So I actually swapped it out. This is not an expensive adapter or base adapter, but I did have to make some modifications. I actually had to Dremel the slots so the screws were fit. There was a little bit tight, so you can't see it on this side, but there's 2 screws here where it screws into that came with the telescope. And to make the adapter, this base adapter fit, I had to just make some minor adjustments with the Dremel. Nothing major. It took me 10 minutes, but still. I wish they came with an adapter that would just fit a Vixen style. But anyway, that's being really picky. You do have this handle and the guides and the scope rings that come with it, which is really nice. And then on the bottom of those is your Vixen base. So that should fit into any mount. And some guys will even attach their guide scope here, put some rings on, and that's where that can fit. I like to leave it for my hand to hold it, and this is how I install it on the mount, but you can easily do that as well. So with this base here that I've installed, and with this, you have options as far as loading other gear onto it. Sometimes I just use this base just for the ASI Air, and it fits right in with its fix and style attachment, and that works great. And that way you have it up on the scope. It also comes with a 99% reflective diagonal, and it's have a picture of it here. It comes with a nice carbon fiber base, so it matches nicely, but it's also a really high quality one. And what's nice as well, it's a 2-inch diagonal, but it also comes with an 1.25 inch adapter. So that means that you can use your 2-inch eyepieces, or if you're using 1.25 inch, you can use those as well. You don't have to buy anything. The scope comes with everything you need. As I mentioned, if you're going to be doing visual, make sure you use good eyepieces if you want to get sort of the max results from a beautiful scope like this. So that's nice. It comes with a high quality diagonal, so you're set for visual. It also comes with 2 extension tubes. So those extension tubes for astrophotography, I did not need to use them. They're sort of what brings the camera farther back, or the eyepiece, so that you can attain focus. However, for visual, I did need to use one of them. So good thing they include that. I've heard that sometimes with a DSLR, you may need to use it as well, which I haven't used a DSLR on this, so I can't speak to that. But with my 533 and my ASI 294, I did not need to use the extension tube. But for an eyepiece, I did need to use one of them. But it just attaches right on the back here. It's not complicated, and it's nice that they give you everything that you need. So there's no complaints with what they give you. I wish it came with a case. That would be nice. These days, companies are getting cheap, and unfortunately they don't provide that. So no case that comes with this. It just comes in a box and foam. So if you are going to be traveling with it, that may be something that you may want to pick up for it. Everything is high quality. Definitely, I really like it. Everything is solidly put together. The focuser is really good as well. I would say if there's one thing, if you're going to be really picky, maybe not the best focuser. Here you can see, now I like that it's a 2-step focuser. That's really good. So there's your main adjustments, and then with the black knob here is your fine adjustments. So that makes it a lot easier just to make minor adjustments to get focus. But you'll find that a lot of guys maybe have changed that out for a more high quality one. If you're really going to get into astrophotography and go serious about it, some guys will change that. And one complaint you'll often hear is not the best focuser. It's definitely not bad at all, and you can use it for many years. But down the road, that is something that you may want to change, but that's not crazy expensive. And for a scope like this that's going to last you for years and decades, that might be worth the investment down the road. But it definitely comes with everything you need to get going right away. Let's talk about the reducer now a little bit. So for astrophotography, I use that reducer. I've only ever used it with the reducer. The only time I didn't use the reducer is when I was doing the little bit of visual that I did. So the nice thing about with the reducer is this scope is f7 for f ratio coming right out of the box. So that's on the slow side for sure. It's not SCT slow, f9, f10, but it's not, quick by any means. Which means if you're going to use it without the reducer, you're probably going to need longer exposures, so probably 3 minutes or so plus. And you need to sync a little bit more overall integration time to your targets. But when you use the reducer, it brings the focal length from 714 down to, I think, 500, give or take, 500 millimeters. And it brings the f ratio to f4.9. And that's more than fast. So that's more than enough to be able to do probably even just 1 minute exposures with this and not have to sync a ton of integration time. So very usable scope. Again, that's what it's all about. You have the option to use a reducer or not. And, without it, you're going to be going after, the problem is without it, you're going to be going after more faint galaxies and things like that, and they're not as bright. So you are going to have to sync a little bit more time without it. So just keep that in mind. I bought my reducer right away. I knew I wanted to use this for primarily astrophotography and primarily, some of those middle-sized targets. And we'll talk about that shortly. But the reducer is something you need to buy as well on top of this. It does not come with the scope, and, it's not super cheap. So keep that in mind when you're sort of planning out how much you're going to spend. If you want to get a reducer with it, you're going to have to tack on a few $100. But it's definitely worth it. It does a great job. And, I bought the Explore Scientific one. There are other brands that you can buy with this. The Explore Scientific one is a 0.7 times reducer. And one thing I want to mention before I forget as well, if you're going to be putting it on this scope, you're going to need an adapter. Okay, I learned that the hard way. I bought the reducer and it did not fit. So whoever you buy your scope from or your reducer, make sure that you ask about the adapter for that Explore Scientific reducer, because otherwise it will not fit on the back. So something to keep in mind and save you a little bit of hassle as well. So let's talk about what you can use a scope like this for. Well, pretty much anything, to be honest. If it's, as we mentioned, this is not the kind of scope where you're going to be going after like teeny tiny galaxies that are super dim and far away. You're going to need a bigger scope. An SCT is much better suited for that if that's really what you like, if that's what your specialty is. You know, this isn't going to be it. If you're only doing visual, I would say you may want an SCT. Yes, I did mention the glass is a lot better and it gives you really nice results, but an SCT for the money will still give you decent results and you have all that focal length. So just strictly visual, although it works amazing, you know, I'd either go up to the 127 version of this or get yourself an SCT. But if you want to do a little bit of both, focusing primarily on astrophotography, this really is an amazing and versatile scope. So without the reducer, as I mentioned, you can go for some of the medium-sized galaxies. You can probably go for Whirlpool, no problem. Maybe even Sombrero, Pinwheel, M101 for sure. Even with the reducer, you can probably go after those, though without it would give you more focal length, and then you can just crop around it. I think the key to having a scope like this and making it a one scope collection type telescope is to have two different cameras. So if this were my only scope, which it's not, I would have two cameras to use with it. I think, in my opinion, the perfect two cameras for this would be the ASI 533. So that has a nice small square sensor, and something full frame like the ASI 2600. Now that is expensive camera, and you know, when you add it all together, it's a lot. But when you think about it, to buy a bigger scope, or even just another wide field scope, and then you have to buy a reducer with that, and you know, all the adapters, to just buy two cameras with one scope probably will be overall cheaper, less equipment to have to worry about. You know, these telescopes take up space, so if you're limited on space, it's nice to just have one that can do it all. And if you were to buy those two cameras, I think you could do just about anything. So with the 533, with that small square sensor, that's what you would use with or without the reducer to give you a smaller cropped look, and you can go after the Whirlpool, no problem. You may need to sink a little bit of time so you can crop and still get details, but it's definitely doable with a camera sensor like that. If you wanted to shoot some of the bigger stuff, you see you're going to have a problem with at 714 millimeters. You cannot fit Orion in this. You cannot fit North America, the Heart Nebula. It's just too much focal length. But when you use the reducer and you use a full frame camera like the 2600, ASI 2600, now you can. Now you have a much bigger field of view, and things like Orion will fit. Things like the Heart will fit. It's tight, but it can be done. Pleiades, all those. So you can basically shoot anything with this scope if you have the right attachments to put on it, and if you have two sort of polar opposite cameras. That's my opinion. That's what I would do. I happen to own both those cameras, so you know, I use them with all my telescopes. But if this were your only one, you could definitely use those, and you have so much versatility. And I think that what really can you ask for? You have a beautiful scope that has really nice glass, and that with the right two cameras can shoot just about anything. Super light, fits on any mount. You know, what else can you ask for? I have some images here on astronomy.tools. That's a website that I use sometimes to sort of plan my imaging nights, and it shows you when you input your telescope, if you're using a reducer and the camera, and then you pick your target, and it actually shows you the field of view. So you can see here are some of the ones. So I have here with the ASI 533. Okay, you can see some of these like the Dumbbell, Whirlpool Galaxy. You know, it's a little bit small, but it's still there. It's like, as I mentioned, if you sink enough time in, you should easily be able to get a nice detailed image of it. And then here's some examples here of with something like the 2600 and that reducer installed. You know, Heart Nebula, Orion, the Soul, all those Pleiades, they'll all fit really nicely, and you'll get some beautiful views, I'm sure, with that. So I don't know what else you can ask for. It really is an amazing scope. Explore Scientific as well, they're known for their customer service. They produce really high quality telescopes, and so far I'm really happy with this scope, and I really do think it's probably up there as one of the best sort of versatile one scope collection type telescopes. So I hope that helped, guys. I think that's just about everything. There really isn't any negatives to it. You know, like I said, if you're being really fussy, I wish it came with a different base, but I was able to rectify that quickly. And the focuser is not the greatest in the world. You may want to upgrade that, but other than that, there really is not a lot of negative things to say. I love the look. I love the lightweight of it, the strong carbon fiber, and the beautiful glass. It makes for an amazing telescope that I would recommend to anyone, even if you're just getting into astrophotography. This is a great, first scope. If you've been saving your money and you know that you want to pursue it seriously, this is a great scope to start with. And like I said, you can over time get a couple cameras for it, and you'll be able to shoot just about anything out there in space. So I hope that was informative to you guys, and maybe it could help you make a decision now or down the road. So thank you as always, guys. I really appreciate it. And as I mentioned early on in this video, I got a lot more coming. I've got more scopes to talk about. I have my mount that I'm finally going to do my full review on that now that I've had some time to use it. And I have a filter I think you might be interested in. It really is a game changer. So I'll have a video on that, as well as my astrophotography target tips series as well. In the meantime, thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate your support, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.